What is the craziest paranormal experience you've had? High school girlfriend says she saw an old man in her house in the study. I laughed it off because her house was no older than 20 years old, and how could it be haunted? I jokingly said she saw a wooden carving her parents had that resembled Jesus because she described the man as having a big white beard. A few weeks later, I was walking from the stairs and into the kitchen where she was sitting. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw an older man sitting at the head of the table in the dining room. I tell her but have to rule out my claim as the seed of belief may have been planted in my head. Months later, her friend from Brazil was visiting. My girlfriend and I are fooling upstairs, and her friend bursts through the door, crying. In Portuguese, my girlfriend asks what's wrong, and her friend says she was listening to music with headphones walking around on the main floor when she ran into an old man with a white beard in the study. There was absolutely no way my girlfriend told her friend as she wasn't a believer in the paranormal and didn't make a big deal about it when she told me. To this day, it is the one case in my life where I have to truly believe we all saw something in that house. So, growing up, I went to Catholic school, and we celebrated St. Nicholas Day in the beginning of December. The tradition goes you leave your shoes out, and St. Nicholas, your parents, will leave presents in them. When I was in elementary school, one year, the day after St. Nicholas Day, my friend came into school all excited. The night before, he saw St. Nicholas in his room, putting presents in his shoe. He described him as having a big white beard, putting something in his left-out shoe, before leaving. At the time, we were excited because it proved to us that Santa was real. 20 years later, I'm having some beers with his friend. We had not seen each other in a long time. He moved shortly after elementary school. We're buzzed and telling old stories, and I bring up the St. Nicholas Day story and ask him if that really happened. Very casually, he goes, "Yeah, dude. It did, but it wasn't St. Nicholas, that was a ghost." He then basically tells me that his old house was built in the 1700s and was definitely haunted by one of the original owners. He said that night he woke up to see an old man with a long white beard, tugging at his foot. When my friend saw him, the old man waved and floated up through the ceiling. It took my friend several years for the experience to sink in, and it scares the hell out of him now. As a quick aside, my uncle and aunt were moving a couple of years ago, and they actually were thinking about buying my friend's old house where this all happened. I told him this story, and he completely dropped interest in the place, thankfully for him. Since a lot of people have been asking, the ghost didn't leave anything in his shoe. The ghost woke him up by tugging on his foot, and he thought it was St. Nicholas. This sounds crazy but is 100% true, at least my narrative. I used to live in a mobile home trailer park growing up. There was a hallway that went from one end of the trailer to the other, with the bedrooms coming off it on one side. My bed was on the wall opposite the hallway, so I could see into the hallway but not down either side. When I was about maybe 6 to 8 years old, if I stayed awake after my dad went to sleep and stared at the doorway, I would start to be able to make out a hand stretching from beyond the doorway in the hall, from the right side of the door to the left. The longer I looked, the more of the hand would appear until, eventually, over the course of a few minutes, I could see a red and white striped shirt or sweater sleeve. If I continued to stare, after a longer period, the body of a boy would appear in the doorway. I specifically remember hiding under the covers most nights when this would happen, mostly at the first sight of him. I was never antagonized further than him, slowly moving, facing my bed, from the right side of the door to the left, and if I continued to stare, he would eventually disappear beyond the left threshold. We moved out of that trailer into a home when I had just turned 9, and that was the end of it. I never really thought about it, and I never told my dad or anyone else about it because, by that time, I had already chalked it up to just seeing things and thought it was my imagination. I'm sure it probably was. About 15 to 20 years later, my dad and I were talking about his best friend that had lived next door, but sadly just passed away. We started talking about our trailer and the older lady that had moved in after us. My dad said something like, "Funny enough, Dad's friend told me a few years ago that that woman used to see a little boy in a red and white shirt, like a ghost or something." I was obviously taken aback and told him about what I had seen almost every night for a few years, and we were both just a bit shocked at what that might mean. Never experienced anything else, but that completely stumps me. I may be 7, sleeping with my parents, and the door was cracked open. I was staring at the door, and I could see a small figure. The door slowly opened, and I saw a kid with a white shirt and dark shorts slowly walk up to the side of the bed I was on, and we just stared at each other for what felt like forever. Eventually, he turned around, walked away, and I never saw him again. I've heard footsteps come from my parents' room from downstairs when no one but me was home, and I've heard tapping on the walls, but I've never seen anything after that one encounter with the little boy. I told my mom this a couple of years ago, and she literally had the padre from her church come to the house and bless it. I was home alone with my old roommate's pit bull, Hamburger. She was very sweet but would bark at strange noises or if she heard something outside the house. Sometimes a light growl and a few barks if she saw a mouse, a rare occurrence, but hey, it was an old house. Anyway, it was like 11:30 p.m., and I was chilling in my room when she started barking. Normally a quick "hey, cut it out" would hush her up, but not this time, so I figured something had riled her up for real. Went out into the hall, and she was looking from the living room down the hall in my direction but past me. So, I looked where she was looking and couldn't see anything. Hall was mostly dark except for the light from my room, halfway down the hall. Looked back at her and she whimpered for a second. Then out of nowhere, she started growling and barking like I'd never heard before and ran toward me. I was not afraid of her at all and knew she'd never hurt me, but I recoiled a bit until she went a couple feet past me and continued barking aggressively at the end of the hall. She was not an aggressive dog at all, so this freaked me out. And it was definitely not a mouse, because she was looking around human head height. I went to the living room, turned on all the lights, and sat on the couch because it was nice and far from the end of the hall. Called her back to me, and she sat by my side doing a low growl for the next 5 minutes. When I calmed down and wasn't feeling so alarmed anymore, she refused to come with me to my room. Later that night woke up to what I swear looked like an adolescent girl in a white dress at the foot of my bed. Here's the catch though. My room at night in that house could get really dark. I shouldn't have been able to see anything as distinctly as that. The only reason I doubt what I saw is because I've suffered my entire life from what I can only refer to as night terrors. It's like sleep paralysis, but only the hallucination part. I'm fully capable of moving, and I'm only half asleep, so I end up doing shit like turning all the lights on and throwing pillows at shit that isn't there. That being the case, I was completely conscious when all that with Hammy went down. And normally, when I wake up to a hallucination, it's something like a giant spider or snake in my bed. Rarely is it a hallucinated person, and I'm almost always terrified no matter what I'm seeing. That night I wasn't afraid at all when I woke up, and it was gone by the time I turned the light on. Never told any of my roommates, and I've only told one other person before. Even writing it out, I'm doubting myself. All I know is that I love the hell out of that dog, and if there was something there, she put herself between me and it. We were visiting my in-laws around Christmas, and we were chatting in their den, having some drinks, and catching up. They had a Christmas tree in the corner of the den. Nobody was sitting near it. My husband and father-in-law were sitting in lounge chairs, and I was sitting with my mother-in-law on the couch on the opposite side of the tree. The two dogs were napping between us. We were all at least 6 feet away from the tree. All of a sudden, their Christmas tree begins to violently shake. Like someone grabbed the trunk and was shaking the dust off of it. A few ornaments fell to the ground, and then it stopped. It shook for a good 10 seconds. The thing is, we were the only 4 in the house. The dogs were sleeping on the couch with us. The tree had been up for at least a week, so no woodland creatures were hiding in it, and nothing else in the house shook. No glass clinking, no other rumbling sounds, just the tree. We checked the news to see if there was an earthquake. We checked online, pre-smartphones and the newspapers, and no reports of an earthquake. We also live in an area where earthquakes are rare. So, I have no clue what shook the damn tree. We all saw it, the dogs slept through it. They did not care. One of my relatives lived in Florida and always told us a story about the reason he would not buy a real Christmas tree, apart from them being ridiculously expensive in the South. One of his friends had bought a tree from a lot and brought it home, got it in the stand, put the lights on, and was in the process of putting the ornaments on it and noticed something moving in the tree. Upon investigation, he found a 2 feet long northern black rat snake that somehow stayed in the tree, without being disturbed through the whole process of setting it up. I always thought it sounded like a bull, but a few years ago, there was a story with video evidence that other people have found this as well. Home alone, hear my brother's voice in the attic calling my name, go check it out, find the source. It's a malfunctioning yak bak in a box, he obviously recorded years ago, claims not to remember, the light in the attic pops and goes out, almost breaking my leg getting out of there. Sat in the driveway till my parents got home. I don't consider it paranormal, and all rational explanations, But I felt a deep sense of dread up there, like I was about to be harmed. I had a toy that did peekaboo. It was a big bird one too, so it was extra creepy at this time. So, when I was little, it was sitting on a shelf in my bedroom, and whenever a car would go by, it would say peekaboo. But it sounded so creepy because of how he said it. So, I got super scared, not realizing what was happening. I assume I told my parents. They moved the toy into their closet, so it was now in an entirely dark area. It started doing peekaboo in the middle of the night. So, they took it and put it in the garage. Then, it scared my sisters because they opened the door to the garage, and it said it while it was dying, so it sounded super demonic, because it got that flash of light. Lamau. Still can't explain it going off in the dark closet though. When a high school teacher of mine was a kid, he had a wind-up toy monkey. He was terrified of it, because sometimes, it would open its eye and start clapping its cymbals in the middle of the night, without having been wound up. One night, he had enough. He took the monkey out into the back, shot it in the left eye with a BB gun, and buried it. Less than a month later, he got hit in his left eye, was nearly blinded, and has had a dilated left pupil for the rest of his life. 20 years old, taking my girlfriend home late one night on small country roads. I go to take a left turn, then suddenly there are bright headlights coming through the passenger's window. She screams, I scream, we are about to be killed, and nothing happens. We don't get hit, the car just vanishes. She is hyperventilating and crying, I'm scared as hell, confused, and adrenaline is racing. We sat there 5 minutes before I could drive again. I started up the road, and suddenly there were intense headlights behind us. They fly up behind us easily, going 50 miles per hour faster than us. Brace to get rear-ended, and nothing. My girlfriend is screaming so loud she is hoarse, and all I hear is go, go, go. We drove the next 10 miles on little country roads at 110 miles per hour, making curves that should have sent us into ditches, with the headlights either mere feet behind us or pulling alongside, but we could never see anything but lights. Then my girlfriend suddenly screamed, what did you do with the fucking stars? I glanced up, not daring to look away from the road very long, and the sky was black. Not moonless night black, I mean gone black. I know how crazy it sounds, but I am driving with the gas pedal on the floor at 3 times the safe speed, scared to death, with a screaming girl beside me, and distinctly remember watching the trees and the headlights to figure out if everything literally vanished, ceased to exist once my car's headlights were past it, because looking out the passenger's window things seemed to just pop and vanish. She curled up in her seat and passed out. There was a sharp 90-degree turn ahead with a huge, deep gully just past it, and there was no way we could make it at our speed. I don't know why, but when I saw the lights beside me, I slammed on the brakes as hard as I could. The lights zipped past us and vanished, the stars were back, and somehow sitting there, I just knew it was over. I woke her up, and she just kind of oozed into her seat and quietly asked me to take her home. We didn't talk about it at all. She just got out and ran inside. I sat in her driveway and trembled for 10 minutes. I was terrified of going home the way we had come, so I numbly drove 20 minutes in the wrong direction and slept in the parking lot of a truck stop because there were people around 24 hours a day. My girlfriend would not return my phone calls for 2 days. I finally got her by calling her mom, who was as nice as ever. Told my girlfriend I really wanted to talk about what had happened. She said, it never happened. In the driest, most emotionless voice that I can still hear 30 years later. We never discussed it, and 3 troubled months later broke up. Never discussed that either, just quit talking. I have never heard of anyone else seeing odd lights, and I've never seen them again, but something was out there with us that night.